You gonna help me water? Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Breaking Browder Farm. Lauren and Forrest here. Today we're going to talk about direct sow versus transplanting your seeds. So direct sowing is where you take your seed and plant it directly into your garden bed. We did that here with our okra. We tried transplanting them and it just didn't seem to want to take. And then your transplanting is where you take your seed and some compost or potting mix and you put them in your seedling trays and you grow them inside under a grow lamp or next to a window. Keep rotating them. So we tried to direct sow all of our crops this year, and I don't think that I will do that again next year. We didn't have that much success with the corn. Yes, they looked great. If you saw our paper towel method of germinating our seeds, they looked great in there. They did great in the transplants for a while, but then once you took them out and you were hardening them off, they didn't do so well. So I think that's a crop next year that I will just direct sow into the garden, as well as all of our root vegetables or crops, our radishes, our onions, our carrots, our lettuce. I'll probably start early spring because you don't need to make sure that the weather is nice and warm for those vegetables. Those are cooler crops. They do well in the cooler temperatures. So I'll probably start some of those cooler crops directly into the garden. Now our tomatoes, they did great with transplanting. So did our squash here and our zucchinis. Our pumpkins, they were kind of hit or miss. Some of them did great, some of them did not. Now they are completely taken over the garden box that they are in. So next year we're gonna have to expand the garden and maybe put the pumpkins and maybe the corn in another part, maybe directly in the ground and not in a garden box, so that way they have the room to vine out and they have the room to grow. So the number one reason why you would direct sow versus transplant is most likely due to not having to disturb your roots. So if all of your roots, they do play a part in your plant, even the tiny microscopic roots that sometimes get torn when you do transplant your plants. So that's something that you can avoid when you direct sow. Another what do you got? Another reason is that when you direct sow, your sprouts come up faster and your seeds, I've learned, tend to germinate a little bit faster. They tend to produce fruit a little bit faster too. So I guess it just kind of depends on your climate that you're in, and if you're in a cooler climate where your soil is cold during the early spring, then you don't want to direct sow because your soil needs to be at least a certain temperature for your peppers and your watermelons and your pumpkins and your tomatoes to start to sprout. Hey, did you want some attention? We're teaching him sign language so he can communicate to us besides just his screaming that he likes to do. So another reason that I will probably direct sow versus transplant next year is the money. You don't have to spend the money on a heat map and a thermometer and the towels and the grow lights and the seedling trays. You can just put them in your garden and water them and you don't have to worry about that. Another thing is hardening them off. that took a lot of time and a lot of patience, because I had the individuals and I'd have to bring every single one out every day just for a couple hours at a time until they eventually reached that point where I could leave them out for multiple hours and then overnight. So that, I mean, it's a little thing, but when you have time that you want to spend with ones like this, or time spending with your dog or your husband who works all the time, then that's another thing. Hardening them off, you don't have to do. The plants are already going to adapt to the environment that they are planted in. So I know I've talked a lot about direct sowing and how I'll probably do that. Now let's talk about some reasons why you would transplant versus direct sowing. So if you have seeds left over from the year before or 2 years ago, and you're not sure if your seeds are viable or will germinate, then that's a good reason to put them in a transplant. So that way you're not wasting your garden space in case it doesn't come up, because sometimes your plants, they won't come up for a week or 2 weeks, just depending on how much water they get and how the environment is. So then you don't have your waste of garden space. Another reason is maybe your garden beds aren't ready. This year we didn't have our garden beds ready. It was our first year here that we were doing a garden and starting our homestead, so we didn't have the compost in our beds. We didn't have the beds ready. Well, it's kind of a fib. We did have the beds ready. We didn't have the fence up. We got the beds ready probably in December, I want to say. So we just didn't have the compost. We didn't have the compost to fill all 8 of our garden beds, which is another reason why we did our transplants. Also, you can beat the last frost if you do transplanting, which is a great thing here in the South. Sometimes you have a last frost in April, sometimes you have a last frost in March, and it just kind of depends. You can read your farmer's almanac and it can tell you everything, but all in all, Mother Nature is going to do what she's going to do. So if you want to save the heartache of coming out here and having to cover up your plants and keep them from getting frostbite, then by all means do not direct sow, put them in transplants. Other than that, I think that's it, guys. Alright guys, well, thanks for watching. That does it for today's episode. Make sure you like and subscribe to follow us on our homesteading journey. Forrest, can you say bye-bye? Hey, can you say bye-bye? Can you say bye-bye? No. Can you say bye-bye?
Bye-bye.